Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lunchtime in the Lab, our very first Connected by Glass event for 2024. I'm Hugh McCarg, Director of the Rakow Research Library here at the Corning Museum of Glass, and I'm thrilled to be your host. Thank you for joining us from wherever you may be in the world. We planned a fascinating program for you. Our David Whitehouse Research Residency artist, Alli Hoag, in conversation with Corning Museum of Glass conservator Astrid van Giffen, and Joe Schill, Senior Archivist at the Rakow Research Library. The Corning Museum of Glass has several making residencies for artists at the studio. The David Whitehouse Research Residency for artists creates time and space for glassmakers to engage the extensive collections of the Rakow Research Library and the museum with a focus on the research element of their creative practice. This is incredibly important to us, particularly to me as director of the Rakow Library. We are stewards of a vital, singular collection on the art, history, and science of glass, and we want to make certain that the collection supports our diverse community of practicing artists as well as researchers and scholars. Our residents are also able to collaborate with our expert staff, as you'll see today. In this program that we have for you today offers a glimpse into how we all learn from each other when our amazing artists are on campus with us. We receive many applicants each year, and Alli Hoag is one of only 2 David Whitehouse Research Residency artists for 2024. Alli's based in Toledo, and she is an artist and researcher, and she's also an associate professor and glass area head at Bowling Green State University. Alli arrived in Corning last week and immediately immersed herself in the Rakow's archive of Leopold and Rudolf Blashka drawings of marine invertebrates and the museum's glass specimens. Today we'll have a rare chance to be in the room with Alli as she continues to explore the Blashka's drawings and glass specimens with Joe and Astrid. Promises to be a unique view into the process of glassmaking, of a glass maker engaging archival collections in the science and practice of glass conservation to advance her exciting creative agenda. So this is what we have planned for you. Astrid, Joe, and Alli will introduce themselves, describe their work, and then they'll dive into their conversation about the Blashkas, their drawings, and the glass objects. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If we don't have immediate answers, we'll do our best to get back to you. Thank you once again for joining us for this first Connected by Glass of 2024. I'm happy to turn it over to my colleague Astrid to begin the program, and I hope everyone online enjoys this time with Alli, Astrid, Joe, and the Blashkas. Thank you.
Hi, and thank you, Hugh, and welcome to the Conservation Lab. Like Hugh said, I'm Astrid van Giffen. I've been a conservator here at the museum for about 15 years now, and my main responsibility is the physical care and preservation of the collection, which includes things like advising on how to handle objects, how to mount them, how to store them, documenting their conditions, and of course cleaning and repairing the objects in the lab. In order to do all of that, conservators need to really understand what materials the objects are made of. So we need to know what materials were used, how they were used, and how those materials deteriorate. So beyond the physical hand skills, conservators use literature and archival research to understand what materials were available and what techniques were available when an object was made. Sometimes we do chemical analysis to identify materials in deterioration products. But most importantly, we look really closely at the objects to see what the objects themselves can tell us about their history. So today we're going to be looking at, we're going to take a close look at the glass models by Leopold and Rudolf Blashka and related materials we have in the collection. I've been studying the Blashka since before I came here. And every time I look at them, I see something new, or I realize a different way that they worked. And I love looking at them with other people, especially artists, to see how they're inspired by these amazing objects. So to give you guys a little bit of a background of who the Blashkas were, Leopold and Rudolf Blashka were a father and son glassmaking team based in Dresden, Germany, and they were active in the 19th and 20th century. And they made these, they're best known for these incredible lifelike models of invertebrates and plants that they made and sold throughout the world. The Blashkas came from a long line of glassworkers. Leopold started his career in the family business of making glass jewelry out of metal and glass. And he later started his own business making glass eyes, jewelry, and laboratory ware. In 1863, he started making glass teaching models of invertebrates, and his son Rudolf officially joined the business in 1876 when he was about 19, but he probably was helping in the studio many years before that. The Blashkas sold these models through printed catalogs and agents to museums, universities, and schools all over the world. And their North American agent was actually just up the road from us in Rochester, New York. These models became so popular that they came to the attention of Professor George Lincoln Goodale, who was the director of the Harvard Botanical Garden. And in 1886, he commissioned the Blashkas to make botanical models for Harvard. For a few years, the Blashkas made both invertebrate models and botanical models at the same time. But in 1890, they stopped making the invertebrate models to focus on the flowers. So why did they make these amazing models out of glass? Well, one of the things was that the 1800s was really a time of exploration and new discoveries, including in the seas. But unfortunately, the sea creatures and these invertebrates really aren't able to be preserved in a nice way. So we look at some of these preserved specimens from the Blashka studio. Now, this is a coral. It looks like a ball of mush. It doesn't have its shape anymore. It's lost its color, and it's barely recognizable. So the Blashka's glass models were a great alternative for people to be able to study these objects and see what the colors were and what structures they had. So here's one of the models that they made. And as you can see, it's primarily made out of glass, but there's also a lot of other materials. So these are really assemblages of mixed media. There's glass, there's metal, there's paper, there's glue. And one of the neat things about these too is that they were made in kind of an assembly line system. So the Blashkas prefabricated all these glass parts that they then put together into a model once they had an order for that model. So the models that we're going to be looking at today primarily belong to Cornell University, and they've been here at the museum since the 1960s as a managed loan. Cornell originally bought about 570 models in 1885, and about 2/3 of those are here at the museum. Most of them are in storage, and I think we have a picture of that. We can show that. And about 1/3 of them are on display in various places on Cornell's campus. The museum itself also owns several models, as well as material that came from the Blashka studio. And all of this we got through Blashka's relatives in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The studio material includes 42 matchboxes like the ones we see here, with different glass parts. These are usually the smaller parts like tentacles and little details that are glued onto the larger bodies like these jellyfish domes here. So we have about 80 of these larger parts, and we will look at these more closely later on. And so in addition to the studio material, we also have some tools at the warehouse. But in addition to this, we got a lot of materials that went to the library. And so I'm going to hand it off to Joe, who will talk about those materials.
Thank you, Astrid. Well, as an archivist and a student of history, I have to say the Blashka legacy in history is just really amazing. I'm always intrigued by how the past informs the present and the future. And the more I study the Blashka family, Leopold and Rudolph, and the work that they did, and the lives that they touched, and the places they touched, and their models ended up, I realized that I've just scratched the surface of what they've done. It was really an amazing history that continues in locations all over the world. Uh, I I often don't get out of the library, and so it's exciting to be participating in an event like this and share like some of the finds that we have and we're around all the time, but don't always get to work with directly. So this was a great opportunity for me to dig into the Blashka collection a little bit and see what's in there. We have an amazing assortment and variety of drawings. For me, like as cool as the glass objects are, I'm kind of prejudiced towards paper-based materials, and the drawings are really exciting and just have an amazing amount of detail that you can see translate into the glass models themselves. While we have mostly glass models of invertebrates, we also have some plants, and we have actually quite a few drawings of the botanicals. So that's another thing that is really nice to be able to see all of that in drawings that were done in, as Astrid said, mostly the late 19th century. Until Harvard commissioned the Blashkas full time to work on the botanicals in the late 1880s and 1890s. Before that, much of their work had focused, most of their work, in fact, had focused on the invertebrate models. And so through some relationships with Harvard, they started to focus on the botanicals, and the glass flowers at Harvard have become internationally known. Yeah, I want to step back and just talk a little bit about what we do for a moment at the library and in the archives. We work on collections that focus on the same thing that the museum does, which is the art, history, and science and technology of glass. But we focus on things that are not glass. We focus on paper-based objects, audiovisual materials, and increasingly digital materials. And so we support the museum, we support the curators in that effort to tell the story of glass and all those different facets. So a couple examples of some of the things that we have in terms of history. The Blashkas really cross everything. Let's start off with that, saying, talk about the art, history, and science of glass. So that's kind of a trifecta there. But we also include all kinds of glass company records, not just Corning Glass Works. We have many companies from West Virginia that were well-known glass companies, including the Fenton Art Glass Company records. Locally, the T.G. Hawks records. Glass artist papers, we have a big variety of those from Sidney Cash, B-Team Records, Catherine Lamb Tate, as well as Klaus Moyer and many others. In science and technology, we collect information on, we have a long history of that with the Dr. Robert Brill papers, who was a longtime scientific researcher here on glass and well-known throughout the world. We also have a huge collection of batch books that have glass recipes to make different kinds of glass here. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the 200-inch disc, which was created for the largest telescope at the time in the 1930s that was installed at Palomar, California, and shipped cross country by railroad from Corning. So one of the things I would like to talk about for a quick minute is the fact that we have all these Blashka drawings, and we have a larger collection of Blashka materials that really tell a larger story of how, their breadth and their connections throughout the world. And there's really quite a bit of information in there beyond just the drawings, and the drawings themselves are really amazing. But we're here, and we have quite substantial collection of their papers, their records, who they did business with, where they shipped, and you know, the different connections that they made. In fact, I just ran across a Astrid had mentioned the gentleman from Harvard, Goodell. We have a paper from him. It's basically a signed contract that was done in Dresden, Germany, between the Blashkas in 1886 to have like a period of time where they were just going to produce glass botanical models for Harvard. And so we have all sorts of records like that that are just floating around and waiting for a researcher to come and write a great book about the Blashkas. So one of the things that we can't do really is bring drawings out of the library if we don't have to. We try to keep them there. So Alli and I the other day had a look at some of the drawings there, and our digital media team came and got some footage of that. So it was really fun to spend some time with Alli looking at the drawings, and she really made some great connections with how the drawings provide a foundation and a strong connection to the actual glass models. So let's take a look at that clip.
What the chapter that David Whitehouse wrote, he was making connections between early Blashka models and these engraving plates in different textbooks. So we know that they were referencing in the very beginning, a lot of the times they didn't have an aquarium set up, but so they were referencing directly these plates that are in these textbooks. They're these beautifully rendered engravings. So you can see here, this anemone that's within the plate is translated in this sketch right here.
Yeah, I see that.
And also, if you're in the collection on display, if you look right up here, this little piece of this engraving is rendered in glass as a model on display right now in the collection across, right on the other side of the building.
Wow, yeah.
And just another thing to point out is when I was in the lab, I was able to look so closely at these details, and these sketches really take in all those details in sketch form, and then they're translated with so much detail and so much care into the glass. Like this one right here, there's quite a few different ways that the Blashkas have sketched, I've noticed, and this one I think is so wonderful because they kind of break down all the different parts, the interiors and the exteriors. So perhaps this is a way of them thinking through all the little different parts and components that would then come together to make the jellyfish that they were sculpting. This is called the aquarium, also by Goss, who did the first plate that we looked at. And this was a text that was teaching you how to gather different aquatic specimens, and then how to set up your own aquarium. So in this text that Whitehouse wrote, he said that the Blashkas were referencing this book and had their own aquarium as well. So it was really cool to read a little bit of this, and some of it was talking about how you get the water for your aquarium. You had to get a special cask, you had to wash it out for 2 weeks. Then you needed to give it to an obliging captain of a ship to go out into open water and to collect the salt water for you and then bring it back. So among all these other things, and you're just like, wow, to have all these models made and to study these, the sea life, there was just so much involved in it. So it really brought that process to life.
I think that's something that we don't always think about today because there's so many people who specialize in all these different areas and we have all this technology, but to think about how difficult and challenging it will be. You're basically coming up with new ideas just to be able to do this kind of work.
That was really great, Joe. Alli, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
please.
Well, there just shows a couple reasons why I'm the luckiest artist researcher in all the land right now. It's just been such a phenomenal time this far being the David Whitehouse artist researcher for the spring. And I just wanted to express like my gratitude and deep thanks to both of you for being such amazing resources and spending time with me and helping me understand and fully unpack the collection here at the museum, and then also unpack the practices that the Blashkas use to really realize all of these models. And you know, just in general, I want to thank the Corning Museum for being such a long-standing source of inspiration for me. I first went to the museum about 14 years ago while I was pursuing my MFA at Alfred University. So I've been coming here over the years, either visiting the collection, visiting the Rakow Library, taking classes at the studio, and it's just been a constant wealth of inspiration for me in my practice. And it's just such an honor to be welcomed back here as the Rakow artist researcher. So just a little bit about my practice to share with you. My practice is really investigates the unknown or the unknowable in our world. And and I really think that expanding and extending moments of not knowing helps us connect to feelings of awe and wonder and curiosity in our world. And it's my hope that through some of my works, there gives the viewer small moments of those feelings of awe or curiosity or wonder. And some of those things that you know, I really think about in my work are connected to those qualities. And I feel those feelings most in nature. So much of my work relates to the natural world and its subject matter. As a glass worker, I work across a lot of processes involving glass in my work, including mixed media, but I have a special affinity for lost wax glass casting. There's when I came to the David Whitehouse Residency to research, I really wanted to focus on the Blashkas for a number of reasons. I think the first core reason that I feel a lot of people feel with the collection is they really connect to the construction of these models and that deep-seated sense of curiosity and fascination with the natural world that Rudolph and Leopold must have had when creating these objects. And for me specifically, I'm interested in these invertebrate collections at the museum to really understand and unpack the construction processes of thinking about the translucency of glass surfaces and membranes, the intricacy of the interiors of some of these forms, the sense of luminosity that these forms contain, and also like the vulnerability of glass as a material through their construction processes. So I'm really just so excited to unpack some of that with the collection and then tie it together to learn more about the processes and the creative practices of the Blashkas as a whole. Think about it. It's 1850, mid 1800s, late 1800s, and these two were able to, in landlocked Dresden, be able to learn about all of these creatures that are so delicate and ephemeral from all over the world, gain that knowledge and be able to express it so realistically in glass. Like, how are they able to do that? And what did their creative practice look like to make that happen? So the archive and the extensive sketchbooks and the collection here tied together really kind of just brought that alive for me. And I found out so many things, and it's such a treat to be able to share it with all of you.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, let's take a look at this first little group of anemones over here.
Yes, please.
So this first little group of anemones is, I believe, largely based on some of the anemones and some of the plates that you looked at in the library. Those from
Goss?
Philip Goss, is that right? Yeah, I think that's what it is.
I think so.
Yeah, and I think we have some pictures of that too. Unfortunately, this was the only group of anemones, or the only anemones that I could bring into the lab, but it is broken. And while that is sad, it also allows us to really look at these things closely. So this little anemone.
All the secrets of construction, which I'm so infatuated with.
That's right. So first of all, you need to see how thin that glass is.
Yeah,
It's incredibly thin.
It is just like paper.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're touching that.
And then all of these tentacles were glued on top of that. And even these little blue dots that you see all around the base there were glued on.
Everything was glued.
Yeah. And actually, in our matchboxes with bits, I found some of these little blue dots that were used on something like this.
Wow. And it's like even though a lot of the collection is mostly made of colorless glass, there is little moments
Yeah, that's true. So
of color.
yeah, so we see some blue glass here. I pulled out some green tentacles.
Yeah.
Some of these tentacles have some brown glass in them. There's some pink tentacles. These tentacles have a little bit of pink, but yeah, for the most part, we start off with kind of blank body parts, like these here, and you can see that they use different methods to create that color. So in this one, there's actually two bubbles of glass. So there's an outer bubble and then there's an inner cylinder that has white stripes painted on it. And that really gives this kind of translucent, this look into the structure of the body too. And then the on the inside, there's like a layer of pigment.
So the pigment is just colored oxides that are kind of loosely sprayed in there, or are they affixed with like a clear fixative?
I think possibly both.
Oh.
We don't really know. We haven't really done extensive research on that. We do, part of the materials that we got from their studio include many bottles of colored powders. So some of those I think are enamels and some of those are pigments. Some of them are glass making materials. So there was really a range of stuff that we have. And we can see some other kind of ways to do this. So in this case, there's glass inside of the glass, and the glass is painted. In this little guy, the glass is also painted on the inside, but the stripes are created with paper. So if you can see that, there's kind of painted orange stripes on kind of a whitish paper.
Yeah,
Wow.
they're so experimental and like just like true to getting the effect and just being so open about what works.
Yeah. And here is yet another way to get stripes. So in this model, it was painted on the inside. And if you look right here, you can see where there's a little bit of the paint is missing. This is a much more opaque paint, so you can't really see the inside this one too well. And then there's stripes of enamel, of a kind of a brown enamel on the outside.
Yeah, with just a little bit of texture too, which
Yeah.
like really like holds the light in a really interesting way. So these anemones are made of like multiple parts here, insides and outsides and tentacles. Can you maybe like talk a little bit about all the different parts?
Yeah, so I just kind of grouped some of our anemone bodies together. This I think was kind of used like a little cap. So some of the anemones, like this one actually here, has kind of an indentation in the bottom, and they may have been capped like this. And then the tentacles would have been glued onto that one. This one actually had a slightly different structure, so pick this one up very carefully. If we look at the bottom of that, we can see it's kind of, I don't know what you'd call that shape, but it's kind of a long flat piece of glass. And then all these tentacles, so there's bigger tentacles and there's all these little clusters of these little tiny hairs that were glued on to this backing. And then this was placed on top of the anemone like that.
That's cool.
Which it kind of wants to stay, but it's a little heavy on one side, so we're not going to leave it on there.
Yeah, and that just like just the allowance of like having adhesive and multiple parts, like it really leaned itself towards like these were made in multiples and multiples assembly line, right?
Yeah, yes, yeah. We see this assembly line process. You can see how these little tentacles might fit on there. See, I think I tried to find some that kind of match the models we have, so this one's a fairly good match. These little tentacles.
Hey, Astrid.
Yes.
There's a question that's coming on the chat.
Okay.
And the question is, what kind of glues were used?
Yes, excellent question. So for the most part, we know that they use animal glues, but there may have been other materials. So some of the paints might have different bindings. So plant gums have been identified, and different natural resins. I think they really just used what was available. But for the most part, to glue the bits together, I believe that they used animal glue. And actually, we have a little bit visible on here. And one of the things about animal glue is that it's water soluble. So, you know, if you get any of these things wet, it's not good. But also it yellows, and you can see this little bit is very yellow. And originally, you wouldn't have been able to see these glue connections.
Astrid, how is it possible to clean them if they can't get wet?
Very carefully. So mostly the ones that I've cleaned, which are most of the ones in the collection, we use dry cleaning, so a really soft brush and a vacuum to get all the dust off of it. There are some solvents you can use that won't solve the paints. Although you always have to test it out because we don't know exactly what paints they used.
So they used these pigments, these loose pigments, they used paints. Did they have fired on enamels as well?
Yes, yes. And we saw some in here.
Those are fired on
Yeah.
enamels.
Yeah. So I think, you know, we'll move on to this other group. So here we have the anemone bodies, and then here's some jellyfish domes. Again, we don't have a lot of jellyfish that I could bring out, but there's a picture of some of the other ones that we have in the collection. And this little dome, which I think is very sweet, and maybe see that there's a little bit of a blue tint to it. So that I think, I know one of the ways that they created this kind of coloring was with a pigmented wax that they would have on the inside. And then you can notice these little holes all along it. Those are actually where the tentacles attach. So they had a little spot where they could stick those in.
Oh,
it's a very sweet little one.
What about those little markings on that cool little component?
Yeah, so this one, I threw this one as a trick.
Yeah.
It looks similar, but it's actually the body of a sea star. So these indentations are where the arms attach.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And there's like a couple little crystals on the inside there.
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of the glass is slightly deteriorating. So those crystals, the little white spots that you see there are salt crystals. So as you know, the humidity interacts with the glass, the alkalis are leached out and they combine with things in the air and form these little crystals and a closed. So we see it a lot in these closed shapes like the domes and the bodies because it holds humidity in there. And so, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's what we're seeing there. Originally, I guess they wouldn't have been like
that. It's the aging process.
Yeah. So here we see some other, you know, domes. So this is kind of one big bubble that was kind of squished in. Some of the other jellyfish, and I think there's an example in the image, have like two glass bubbles inside one another. And we have a couple, no, I guess we just have one example, but here, you know, this piece might have gone inside of another bubble.
And all of those are also glue joined together, right? Or are they?
Yeah, and I was trying to understand, like, there's definitely glue in there, but how on earth would they have done that? I don't know. This is where it's a call out to all you glassy people, glass makers out there. Like, how do you stick that bubble in there?
Yeah.
Oh, and then glue it. I don't know.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So here I also have some of these little tentacles. So we saw the bigger tentacles for the anemones. These are some little tiny little tentacles that I think there's a model, a jellyfish that has these all around the edge like that.
Wow.
So here we have kind of a make your own model set.
Yeah. Just so intricate. I know, and just looking at like
are just really cute little things.
I know, and just like looking at like the tenuous connections and between like the little pieces of glass and is that copper wire?
Yeah, so on this jellyfish, these tentacles are, again, this is colored glass. And there's a little piece of copper wire on the end of the glass that's then glued onto the anemone or the jellyfish. And this is one of the simpler jellyfish.
Yeah.
We've seen some really much more complicated ones too.
Wow.
Yeah. So should we look at this little, this is called hydra. And one of the things that I've learned looking at the Blashkas is a lot more about biology, especially marine biology. And this is actually where jellyfish come from. So these little polyps pop off and form little jellyfish.
Incredible. Some of those little components are some of my favorites.
Yes,
The little
yeah, I
bubbles
agree.
within the bubbles.
I agree.
Oh,
What I also really love about their models of hydras is they usually include a life-size model. So this tiny little thing right here is what this creature, how big this creature actually is in nature.
wow. And another, I think, I'm not sure if the video had it, but here's, I brought out a sketch of that hydra component, and it was wonderful to see the sketch and the drawing of that hydra and see the little squiggles in the drawing and see how it's perfectly translated into glass by a beautiful little coiling of a copper wire in the pigment. So that was just such a treat for me, like going from the collection and then coming here into the lab to get a close look at some of the components. And then also, I don't know, could the camera zoom in on some of these little, you could see like a little bit of striation on each one of those little polyps that are coming out. And that's done with, I think Astrid said like a tiny bit of white that was then twisted. And if you look at that original drawing, like very up close, there's tiny little hatch marks on that drawing that like really kind of like show that their intent to like translate that in glass. So
Yeah, it's really nice.
yeah, just going back between the drawings and the models, it shows like this testament to like deep extended looking and honesty to that, to what you see and expressing that in what you make. So it's just awe-inspiring to me for sure.
It's yeah, it is amazing, and it's making me think of the line. I think it was from Rudolph, who kind of shrugged off the idea of photography as being like not really worth it. Like he had to do the drawings,
Yeah.
to have what he wanted to do the models.
Mm-hmm.
I just also want to point out this yellowy color that you see on these stems. That's the adhesive. So we know that these were all glued on, and originally that would have been a lot clearer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was another like beautiful tie that we mentioned in the video too about the collection and like the relationship between sketches and other engravings and how these the imagery was translated into glass, and this beautiful Physophora magnifica that we see here. If you could see on the label, I was really interested in some of these labels have different biologists' names on them, and sometimes those biologist names have plates associated with those animals. So the Goss plates, they had a textbook, and those plates were inside of a textbook. And we could see that those sketches that the Blashkas did like related directly to those studies. Like for this one right here, we also had the sketches and the drawings, and we have a beautiful large folio book of the Haeckel prints. And I was able to look and see the plate that Ernst Haeckel, who is a well-known illustrator and biologist of the time and also a professor. There is this beautiful etching as well of the Physophora magnifica. So it was wonderful to see all those connections tied together. And yeah, Joe and I had a magical moment too with the archive looking through photo albums.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so cool. Like not only do you have your family and friends in beautiful photo albums at that time, but you have your major donors of the wares in there. They had big front, I think they were like the first 2 pages of the photo album. But in there was a very young picture of Ernst Haeckel in there as well. So even like your collaborators, intellectual friends, they also made it into the photo album. So that was such a treat to see in the archive.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love being able to make these connections. I believe we have an image of the drawing that the Blashkas made of this model as well, which is, yeah, it's lovely to see all these different connections. Let's move on to our next little area over here on the other side of the table.
around you. I'm sure. Oops. Here we go.
So we're going to look at this model of a sea cucumber first. I believe we have an image of some of the other models that are like this. And if we can pull that up, we can see that they all have a very similar shape, especially kind of this tail end of things. But they're not exactly the same.
But they're definitely like in the same similar kind of thought form and arrangement for sure.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And, while I was working on this piece, I was looking through some of our digitized Blashka drawings, and I had one of these aha moments. If we can see the next slide, we'll see why. So this was a sketch that I found that, it doesn't have any species identified on it, but I recognized the shape, and it was like, oh, that's made out of 3 pieces of glass. So I started looking for the connection points. And Alli and I were looking at this in the lab too, and we found one connection point right here. It's a little hard to see. I think we have an image of that I took previously.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I see it only because you're pointing it out.
Exactly.
Otherwise-
And we never were able to find the second
I can
connection
never,
point.
yeah, we looked
There's-
for
Yeah,
a while.
long time. Yeah, and I think we had some where it was like, I think maybe this is it. Maybe it's over here. It looks like it's a little thicker here. Maybe but none of them that was like, oh, okay, that's where it is.
I know, it's just, being able to have like the chance to be this close to the specimen, know where the joint could be and still not being able to see it.
Yeah,
It's like amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
And one of the other models,
Yeah.
we did find both of the connection points. And if we can go to the next slide, we can see that. So where those red circles are, you can see that the coloration's a little different. And again, here it's the glue that is causing the issue. So the glue yellowed, and it made those areas stand out more. We don't see that in this one because of the color. The other thing I wanted to point out about this one is that all these little individual dots were all glued on separately. And here we actually have some of similar parts that were in one of the match boxes. They're
It's
lovely.
incredible. There's hundreds of glue dots. Fascinating.
Okay, we'll move on to the next model. So this model also has dots that were individually glued on. And I think you guys saw a drawing of this one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a beautiful detailed sketch of that.
Yeah. One of the things that you can see in the sketch is this interior pink vein of some sort. So, even though it's kind of hidden behind this coating that's on the glass and these little dots, there's still some reference to what was inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. So when each one of those little glue dots on that piece is glued on
Yes,
too.
yes, yeah. And I think I looked at this one under the microscope so that I could show you guys if we can pull that image up.
Yeah, there it is.
So there you can see, and you'll notice around all those little dots, the yellowed glue. And then the one area where one of the dots is missing.
Yeah, and each one of those dots, like on the microscope, that looks big. I mean, like they're maybe
pretty
a
tiny.
millimeter.
Yeah.
These are like a millimeter, maybe diameter dots
Yeah.
that are
really
each
tiny.
glued on.
Oh,
I can't remember, Astrid,
Yeah.
if you had mentioned it, but like the Blashka family, the ancestors had a history of jewelry
Yes,
making. And so you can see, when I'm looking at this, and I mean, it could just as well be small diamonds there.
Yeah, exactly. And Leopold actually started off making jewelry with glass and metal. And we see that technique in a lot of these models. So we've already seen the metal on the jellyfish and the siphonophore. And even this little guy has this kind of ring of tentacles that is on a metal wire coated in glass. They're really, really incredible.
Yeah,
That's
they're just
amazing.
wondrous.
Yeah.
Ooh, so we have some more parts
So
over
yeah, so
here.
here we have lots of parts.
Yeah.
So I pulled out these parts because I wanted to show you guys something that relates to a different model. So if we can get the slide of the sea star up, the image of that model. And so if you look at that, so this is a abandoned sea star, and it has all these hundreds of these little hairs, and they're all made out of glass. But they weren't individually glued on. So here we have something that's very similar to that. So these little hairs, but they're kind of little clusters. So this, I think, has 3 little parts.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
hold that. Yeah.
You can, so, and they're different lengths. So we have some really long ones. This is a pretty long group.
They're just stringer thin.
Yeah.
Each one of these little
Yeah.
clusters of like 2 or 3 or 4, just with like hair thin pieces of glass
Yeah.
collected on the end.
I know they're amazing. And you know, there's some of these other kinds of little clusters that we can see in other models. This one specifically, I think, relates to the sea star. And we found a drawing of that one as well. But if we can go to the microscope, we can see what these little hairs might look like on the actual model.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, let me turn that on. We have that set up so we can look at it, and I might just stand over here. So we can see different these different clusters where, you know, this model, this hair couldn't have been glued in there. It was definitely made hot as a little group. And also the paint on the little lines there.
Oh, it's just so incredible to see. It's like, you know, it's like the level of detail is so exquisite. And then you could see like the little like minutes where they could like save just a little bit of time by still having that exquisite level of detail through making these little tiny clusters and grouping them together. And they just perfectly align with no matter how tight the curve is too. They have all sorts of like variation. And each of the little cross hatching of the little segments of the arm, it's just it's so great that we get to see it at this level under the microscope.
Yeah, I love showing things under the microscope because it gives you a completely different view of something, right?
Yeah.
Like you look at this model without a microscope, you might know that there's these little clusters, but it's a completely different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like jaw dropping the level of detail. That's great. So maybe do we have some time to look at some of the plants maybe?
Yeah, I think we do. So
That's great.
let's take a look at some of the plants. So we only have a few flower models. We're the only place that have flower models outside of Harvard. And we don't really know when these were made, but or what or how, you know, we know who we got them from, but we don't know why they never went to Harvard.
Oh, interesting. So yeah, there's maybe like, can we look in this box right here? I love this.
Move this the light a little bit
Oh,
more.
perfect. I thought that this was a beautiful way to kind of understand their construction methods just a little bit more, and the like importance of the paint,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In connection to the glass.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, before I came here, I did a research project at Harvard and was able to really study the glass flowers there too. And I noticed that how with the invertebrates, we see these blanks as colorless glass. And that's how the flowers started. But eventually they got to the point where they were using colored glass for their leaves and other kind of blanks. So this is a lovely unpainted leaf, and you can see all these little details on the leaf, and just the movement in it, I think is really amazing.
It's just so thin as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, very glassy.
Yes,
You know,
yeah,
it,
yeah.
yeah. And then like once you will see the same kind of leaves with the paint, you see it has like the glass still gives it this like inner luminosity. So it's like there's a reason why like you don't use paper or some other material and then paint over it. It's like this paint on the glass like gives it this like inner glow that kind of conveys that sense of like being alive. That's so unique with this collection.
And it really creates this depth that
Yeah.
you don't get with other materials. So the translucency, but you can also see, you know, it can't just be glass, right? If it's just glass, you don't get the same effect. And there's just really extensive layering. on both the flower models and the invertebrate models.
They're just so exquisite. And then, you know, you could just tell like how deeply they looked at the anatomy of each plant too. The way that they construct it is like connected to the way the plants come together. It's like this stem going into like this like pre-petal kind of cup that's then like has individual petals and stamen that are then all fused together with wires.
Yep.
It's just so incredible to see how thoughtful all the way through the making process and how true, like you could tell that they were looking at the real thing. And Rudolph spent numerous like travel excursions, like, you know, where we saw the anemone plates. There's a lot of like plates that the early invertebrates, they were looking at plates of other illustrators and then making the anemones. With this, we know through the archives that Rudolph went on these travel excursions to numerous places and was drawing, not taking photographs, but like literally drawing and seeing the specimen in situ, drawing the plants, and then taking these cross sections and really taking these close-up studies of all the different parts of the plant.
Yeah.
And for me, like the Harvard collection and the archive here in the botanical studies, there's another kind of deep line of research that I'm looking at right now. And I have a more like abstract body of work that I'm working on. And I'm really looking at these like geometries of becoming. And when I went and visited the Harvard collection, not only are these beautiful plant studies there, but I discovered, and I was like, how did I not know about this? There's these beautiful enlarged cross sections of the plants, mostly like the reproductive organs of the plants. And I think that there's a slide, and I had like this, here's a picture of like some of like the newer work that I'm working on, but there's another magical slide that was a magic full circle research moment for me.
Before this.
Yeah, it's I think before. Sorry, thank you. It's it's of the Harvard collection and me discovering in the Harvard collection these beautiful enlarged cross sections. And then when last year I was at a workshop, and I of course go to the Rakow when I am in town. And I looked at the drawings, and there was this huge collection of all the botanical drawings, and all of the drawings had these really beautiful cross-section sketches of all the internal reproductive organs of the plants. And here's my like happy find, where I found the drawing that corresponded to the photo that I took earlier in the Harvard collection.
That's so great.
Yeah, and there's just like, there's literally hundreds of these different kind of beautiful sketches of all these internal organs of the plant, which I just love.
Yeah. So interesting about those cross sections. So most of those are actually, again, made with glue and glass. So, you know, there's glass elements that are glued on top, and then kind of the outlines are glue, and you know, some of the detail was also created with glue.
Wow.
They're really amazing.
They were glue maestros.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. They really were.
Very practical.
Well, I think that's a great place to kind of wrap this up and open it up to more questions from the audience. So if we have some questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. It's amazing to come over here and see all this.
I know.
That's wonderful, Astrid, Alli, and Joe. So there are a few questions. We're going to get to as many questions as we can. Any questions that we are not able to answer, we will come back in the chat with answers later on. So we will answer all questions, even if we don't get to hear from Astrid, Joe, and Alli. So Judith has a question. Can you talk about the amount of time involved in creating one piece, or if they perfected an efficient method to create these pieces?
Well, they must have been very efficient, because I know our research that was done by our curatorial team a few years ago, they discovered 174 customers across 25 different countries. And they estimated, based on the number of models each customer ordered, that they must have made 10,000 to 15,000 models over 27 years. So that's more than a model each day. So they must have been very efficient with this. We don't have a whole lot of information about how they made their models, except what the models and the materials themselves tell us, because they were very kind of secretive about this. They didn't have any helpers. It was just the two of them.
Right. Right. Yeah. As far as we know, there weren't assistants, which was I was thinking about, like that would have made it quicker, but like it
Yeah.
seemed like they did not do
Maybe,
that.
maybe Mother Blashka helps, but we don't know for sure. I think that there's a little bit of a reference in one of the letters to the Wares, who were the benefactors that paid for the Harvard collection, the Harvard glass flowers. That talks about how Leopold was the one who liked to make the model, make the glass and be at the flame, and that Rudolph would paint them. But other than that, I haven't really seen a lot of kind of firsthand accounts of the invertebrates.
Nor have I.
So fascinating. Okay, we have another question from Warren. And this is probably for Astrid. Astrid, have you observed signs of disease in this collection?
Yes. So we already looked at some of the body parts that had these crystals in it. And so glass disease is kind of a term for deterioration. It's not one that I usually use because it's not contagious and you can't really cure it. It's just an instability in the glass and kind of the environment it's in. Pretty much all of the models that I have seen that I can see it, so the clear ones, there is some sign of glass deterioration. I mean, I've seen it in other collections as well.
So Sally also has a question. I think it harkens back to when you were speaking of the anemones as a group together. And she wants to know, has there been a chemical analysis of the enamels been done on the collection?
No. No, there's been some on some of the glass, but not of the enamels or the powders, the jars of stuff.
You've written and participated in some papers I've seen that talk about sciencey things.
Yes, yes. So I have done some analysis of the glass itself, and it's been published. I could probably find the papers for you. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what all the different materials were, but we do know that the bodies are mostly like a mixed alkali glass that was probably purchased. And then a lot of the little added details, a lot of those are lead glass, and the colored glass is all lead glass.
So we have one final question, and this question is for Alli. Oh, hey, so Alli, could you tell us what you're taking away from your time here with the collection and this residency?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think, it's like, I got to see like hundreds of images and learn so much about the collection. And I think that like a lot of that naturally unpacks over time through working in the studio again and having to make those connections back. But I feel like just learning about the Blashka's creative practice was really inspirational for me. Just like I mentioned before, like deep looking at the details and being able to translate like how you're looking deeply and then give that as a gift to other people, through a shared experience, I think is super inspirational and is like a continuing source of inspiration about like this collection for me. And yeah, trying to express wonder through making, it's just, I feel like anyone who sees this collection, it's like, it's like I smile like stupidly all day because it's like I feel like a kid again because like it's just like, how is this possible? It's this like, I don't know. I just have a deep fascination for this work, and it's like, how can my practice like offer someone moments of like fascination and wonder in my own practice? So I think those are like some core takeaways that, that will last like the rest of my lifetime in my practice for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And that's why I love sharing this collection with people. Just be inspired by your inspiration too.
Yeah.
So with that, we have come to an end. Thank you for joining us for this first Connected by Glass of 2024. We've looked at some amazing objects, and we really saw how the library materials and the glass collection materials work together to give us a more complete story of the works of Leopold and Rudolf Blashka and how they inspire other works of art. So thank you, Joe and Alli, for being here with me today, and Alli for sharing some of your residency with us. And we really loved giving you, the audience, a behind the scenes look at how we work with artists and researchers to really delve into a specific area of our collection and bring to life the nexus of collections, research, and artist practice. So thank you. And thank you guys again.
you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Great opportunity.
Yeah, and a little shout out to my son, Kieran, whose birthday is today. So happy birthday, Kieran.
Happy birthday, Kieran.
And if you would like to enjoy future Connected by Glass events, please sign up for our mailing letter or our mailing list, which will be linked in the chat. Thank you.
See you.
Bye.